Good evening. How are
Hi.
you?
Good, thank you.
Okay. Today we're going to do an interview for you. Today's date is April 27, 2010.
Okay.
I am the interviewee. My name is Terry Johnson Mack. We'll be interviewing you, Mrs. Kaffie, Dr. Kaffie Clark,
Right.
here at the Children's Coalition. Start off by telling me your date of birth and what branch of service you were in and the years of service you were in.
Okay. Date of birth is November 27th, 1955. And the branch of service is U.S. Army from September of 1974 to November of 1978.
Okay. What branch of service were you in?
U.S. Army.
U.S. Army. Okay. Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I enlisted in the delayed entry program.
Okay. How was the process?
Service would have been 77. Would have been November of 77.
Okay. How was the enlisting process? Was that hard? How did it... Explain to me how it was function. How does it work?
I actually went to the recruiter's office in West Palm Beach.
Okay.
I lived in Riviera Beach with my parents at that time. And I already was of age because I was in college. I was attending Florida State University. And I had completed my freshman year and went to sign up for the military as opposed to going back to Florida State as a sophomore. So basically it was a matter of me going to the office, finding out what was available, and signing the papers.
Gotcha. Why did you join?
For stability. I didn't really want to go back to college. My roommate had a master's degree, and this was in 1973, right out of high school. And in 74, when it was time for us to go back, the economy was such that we were making minimum wage with the college degree. And at that point, it was $1.65 an hour. And I chose not to go back because I couldn't see a benefit. Going in the military offered me stability, offered me benefits, and travel. And I would be trained. So I took that and I signed up delayed so that I could set my date, because this was in June. And I wanted to go in September as if I were going back to school, because I didn't really tell lots of people what I was going to do.
Clever, clever. Why did you choose to go in the U.S. Army?
I just wanted to go in the Army. I thought about Air Force, definitely didn't want to go in the Marines. And I ended up with the Army because actually I had a brother that my mother signed up. And in the 70s, parents could actually send their children. So I just kind of followed suit, but I went on my own.
Oh, okay. Do you recall your first days of service?
My basic training, yes. Tough drills, Raza. Oh my gosh. I remember green dust under the bed. Do I remember those days? Yes, I would say.
Dust. Emphasize, what do you mean when you say green dust?
Everything is U.S. Army and it's green, and they own everything. So even the dust on the floor was green. It was a part of it because from the mattress to the spread.
Oh, okay. Tell me about your boot camp and your training experience.
The training was intense, lots of PT, and the interesting part of my basic training is that I was an asthmatic. So I didn't participate in sports in high school because I couldn't really run. I'd get out of breath. I was sickly as a child. But I wanted to finish that basic training. So I trained when nobody else was training. I was doing jumping jacks, 4:30 in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, doing PT to get myself in shape so that I could pass that test and complete my basic training. So it was intense, but it taught me discipline, and even today I still fold my t-shirts in thirds. So
Really?
the mark is still there. For AIT, that training also, because I love learning even back in those days. So I learned a lot, got a chance to meet a lot of people. Basic training was at Fort Gordon, Georgia, and I went to AIT was at Georgia, and I was in South Carolina for my basic training. And I went from there, from Georgia to Carolina to Fort Ord, and that was my duty station. So I didn't go overseas.
So you didn't, yeah, you stayed here. So, could you give me a little emphasis on your instructors? Because I remember you said a few words about that they were kind of tough. Do you remember?
They were. They were. No, I can't think of their names, but I see faces. And I remember one lady that was just so tough, and they would always call me my last name, Johnson. And they would call that name, and I would just shudder because I knew that there was either going to be a problem or I had to do something. And I never raised my hand to volunteer because I never knew what that was going to take. Whether it was going to be KP washing a pot that was big enough for me to actually get inside, because at that point I weighed maybe 120 something. So it was tough going. But they were good at what they did, and they wanted us to look good on that field when it was time to graduate. So I understood that process.
Through it being hard, what did you do personally to cope with that? Cope with the stress and the tension and it being at you?
That wasn't really an issue. I was raised by my grandparents,
Okay.
and when she spoke, I moved.
Okay.
So I was very disciplined.
Okay.
And if I started a project, I ended it. So I didn't leave things half finished. So when it was time for inspection, I was already where I was supposed to be. So that was a non-issue for me.
Okay. Did you serve in any of the wars? No.
It was during the Vietnam era
Okay.
that the 70s were. So I didn't actually go anywhere overseas, but it was interesting that in Fort Ord, they actually brought refugees that we did have to post a guard after our guys came back home, and they would bring out civilians, and we actually had to stand guard for them to protect them.
Oh, really? So that was your experience here,
Right, in
while
Fort
you were
Ord.
here. Okay. How did you stay in touch with family during this time, during the Vietnam period?
Phone calls and letters. And I actually, in Carolina, I had an uncle that lived there. So I had visits, and then we could go off post. So I would call family and let them know what was going on, because I didn't go home. I didn't go home in between training.
Right. So you stayed out there.
And went to Fort Ord and didn't come home.
Really? So that was your little cover up there. Oh, I was at school. Huh?
Yeah, I was. I'm fighting for the country right now,
Yeah.
so a little tied up.
Right. Where were you born and raised?
Palm Beach County, right
Oh,
here.
you were born right here. Huh?
In my grandmother's house with a midwife.
Oh, really? Okay. Could you tell me a little bit about your family's background?
My father was in World War II, the big one.
Okay.
There are 6 of us children, and I'm the eldest.
Okay.
All of us graduated. I have a brother that's the baby, the youngest of all of us, who is an attorney, and we've done well.
Okay.
My father is deceased since 1997, and my mother is here, a pastor in the AME Church, Reverend Reba Boone Johnson. She's here active.
Okay. What was your main wartime job? For example, while during the Vietnam War era, what was your main duty?
72 Charlie, which was communication specialist. So that's hooking up the wires in the field and making sure that everybody could talk to each other during the field exercises.
Okay. Now, was that a duty of your choice?
Kind of, sort of.
Uh-huh.
I had a couple of choices. My intent to go into the military was actually to be in intelligence, and I started out in military police.
Oh.
But that wasn't the right route,
Mm-hmm.
because I was actually looking for an embassy duty position, which did not happen. So I changed my MOS.
Could you describe to me what MOS stands for?
It's the training. There's a list of jobs. So in the military, everything has a name or an initial or an acronym.
Okay.
So it's just when you say what did you do, you think of MOS, which was your skill.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Okay.
and that was 72 Charlie. And for some reason, you.
What kind of training were you giving, and where was your training?
The training was again in Fort Gordon. And we were given intensive classroom exercises plus outside field duty, bivouac, where you stay overnight in tents and drink water out of your helmet.
Really?
So,
Okay.
so it's fairly intense, and we drive huge trucks. I was the major's driver in the Jeep. So whenever we would go out and he needed to do anything, I was the driver. So I got a chance to take him to meetings and make sure that things were as they should be. Got a chance to drive big trucks and the whole thing.
Oh, that's cool.
Yes.
What was your title?
Yes. I was a Spec 4 at that point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were there any special rules or conventions that you had to follow when you were with the major?
Always rules in the military.
Right.
Always rules. Are you breathing? Yes. Okay. So there are rules, and you have to stand by the vehicle, parade rest, waiting for him, and get him entered into the vehicle, and then you go around. So it's pretty structured, regimented.
Yeah. That's
To be
military.
expected.
Yeah, that's military.
Absolutely.
Did you develop any friendships during your training or the activity itself?
My class that I graduated with, some of them became 72 Charlies as well, so I knew people there, but of course there were other people that we befriended along the way. And there were a couple people that I maintained communication with even after the military.
Okay. Now, and also during this time, were there any how did it change your basic activities before you went in, before the Vietnam era? You were just doing your basic training, your PT. When the era came, how did it affect you? Did it change the way you did things, the way you work?
No, the entire service period was during the era.
Oh.
Because remember you wouldn't remember, but the war would have gone back into the 60s, and that's where I came in the 70s. So anybody that's during that period, it's called the Vietnam era.
Okay.
So there was no change.
There was no change for you personally.
Right.
Okay. Besides your father, did you have any other family members that were actually in the military?
A brother who did not stay, but my mother signed him up. My youngest brother also, I have a brother that actually lives in Germany, and he was in the military and got his honorable discharge and just never came home. So I had not seen him in over 20 years because we kept passing each other as we were in the military.
Oh,
So 3 of us stayed in, and 1 got a discharge.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we got lots of military with the kids, but not with the grown-ups.
Oh, okay, yeah. So, well, it seemed like it's running in the family a little bit then. What kind of social activities were you involved with outside of work?
Not a lot of social activities on weekends. You get your downtime. You just go into the local city, which probably would have been Augusta. In Georgia and in California, I was near Salinas, San Francisco, so you could kind of freely roam about and travel and do things, go to Lake Tahoe. So it was always something to do. Always something to do.
So that will be the way you spent your time, just
Out.
seeing
Yes,
sights.
going up to Big Sur. Yeah.
Okay. Did you or any others get married during the wartime?
Yes, I got married while I was in California, as a matter of fact. My oldest child was actually born in the hospital there, and the cost was $6.47.
Really?
Yes.
For the whole thing?
For the whole baby.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So I had an amazing experience.
Okay. Well, that's that's different, definitely different from the
I
time
would
now.
say.
Yeah.
I would say.
Now, during the Vietnam era, how did you feel about the propaganda and in the news and on the television about the war?
It was disturbing because I was on the inside, so I met many people who were actually there. My ex-husband's brother was actually shot down in Vietnam, and I met people that came to California to that duty station that were there the night that he was shot down. So I have a tremendous respect for those who served in actual wartime and were there on the front lines. And the way that they were received in the community, being called killers, and it was just very disturbing because they were not respected. And I just don't think that they understood the trauma and what our guys had actually gone through. So I have a tremendous respect for service people.
Now, being that, like you said, it was disturbing, did it affect you mentally in any way?
Nothing that would be a disorder, just a empathetic notion about what it must have been like for those families to not be received and to not get the benefits that they were truly deserving of.
Okay. Now, when you when you left the war, when you left the service, was wartime over or was it still continuing?
It was coming to the end because the war was actually over. But there's residual, there are things that still had to be done, and you can see that the policies started to change by the time I was out.
How did you feel about it ending?
Well, I was happy, of course, because we don't want to lose any more lives, and it's life-changing.
When you heard the news that the war was over, that you were like excited, wanted to party, just...
That was, the war had been over, and yeah, it's a big burden. It's really, and of course, we're on the winning team, so that was a good thing. Right. But now the fallout of what do you do next, and how do you prepare to go on? So there's that transitory period.
Did you keep your job or continued any other wartime activities? For example, did you keep your position as the audio and the visuals, excuse me, not audio and visuals, the communication?
No, once I was out, I changed careers.
Okay. And what is your current career?
I changed career. I was in college when I went, and after I got out of college, I had my first child, so I parented at home and didn't work for a little bit. But then I put myself back into school and ended up working for the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Department. So I was still doing regimented things and ended up working for the post office because of the benefits. So, I was used to routines and, following rules. So that worked.
Yeah, it seems like it kind of works right in with military life. It's kind of right behind, stay with tight schedule.
Absolutely.
What is your current career? What is your position now?
Right now, I'm a private practitioner. I'm a licensed mental health counselor, and I work with insurance cases. I work with adolescents. I work with individuals and couples.
Okay. Was your education supported by the GI Bill?
Part of it. Part of it, but there's a limitation as to when those benefits would run out, and they give you 10 years. And I remember that mine ran out in 1987, and I actually went to see if I could get it extended, and of course they denied that. So I continued to go to school and up through the doctorate degree, but I was able to get started with the military benefits.
Wow. So you would say military really benefited you?
And even today, I receive the medical benefits through the local VA hospital, and I wouldn't have changed a thing. I wouldn't have changed a thing. Even with all of my degrees and all of my experiences, the military is held in a special place.
And I see that you have a growing respect for military personnel.
Absolutely.
Did you make any close friendships with anyone there that you continue to connect
Not
with
up
now?
through today,
No.
but I have had contact once we were out, and we did stay because there was a time when everybody's trying to readjust, and what do you do when you go back home? How do you get a job? And because we didn't have to worry about those things, we didn't worry about where we were going to stay. We didn't worry about, you know, how we're going to afford the rent because we didn't have those issues. But coming back home, you didn't want to live with your parents, and you're already grown, so now you need to figure out how to make your life work. So I wasn't the only one going through that, and we got separated. And life, children, wives, husbands gets in the way.
Life, like you said, life.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell me one of your most memorable events, or any event that happened that you can remember the most, that is most detailed to you within the service?
One of the things that stand out in my mind was not a good event, but I'll never forget it. And it was on a weekend excursion. We were doing, we were out in the field on a field exercise, and we had to drive what they call deuce and a halves, big trucks. And I had a partner who we were unloading the back of the truck, and she somehow slipped on the bed of the truck, and she was caught between the bed of the truck and the tailgate and sustained a serious injury. So we had to have the helicopters come in and take her to the hospital. And it was one of the moments where you really feel like time just stood still. There was nothing happening, everything stopped, and it was just a focus on her. And it really gives you an appreciation for how fragile life really is, because just a few minutes before that we were laughing and talking, and almost immediately thereafter all we saw was blood. And it just got everybody's attention, and she ended up actually getting a discharge from the service due to that service-connected injury. And that will just stay with me, and it gives me a further appreciation for the men and the women that were there in some capacity in the war, because those images are still there, and you don't forget
it. Did she recover from the sustained injury?
She did, but her life would never be the same again.
When you arrived at your first basic training, could you tell me
Scared
a little bit how?
to death.
Yeah.
Scared to death.
Okay. Could you tell me a little bit about how the process works?
They call you by your last name. You do not exist anymore. Anything that existed in your life prior to that moment is now history. So everything is changed. When they tell you to move, when they tell you to jump, you simply follow orders. And you never know what the orders are going to be, so you are always ready. And a mistake could cost you a few push-ups. So I learned quickly. And being away from home, and I'd already been away at college, but not like this. And being responsible for everybody in the squad was a new concept, because if you didn't want to do something in your own life, you don't do it. But when you have a squad and somebody does something, everybody pays the price. So you learn to get along.
Okay. Yeah. That sounds pretty tough, but you know, it's how it works. Could you explain a little bit of how the basic training procedures go? As you know, just paint a picture for me of you showing up, you getting off of the bus or truck. What is the next few steps? How the process works?
They blow a whistle and you march over to where they are, and you get yourself in a line, and they tell you that it's a flimsy line, and you stand there, and they walk around and tell you how sloppily you're dressed and how they're going to get you in shape. So all you hear is teeth chattering and knees knocking, because nobody wants to be isolated or pointed out. So they assign you a bunk, they tell you where you're going to sleep, and let the games begin. Everything is on a schedule. When you wake up, when you go to bed, when you eat, when you go to the bathroom. Everything you need permission to do it. So picking up the telephone, something that you take for granted in basic training, not really happening.
Really?
So you earn your privileges, and you also earn your demerits as well.
Okay.
And that lasts for a period of 6 weeks. And
No.
it doesn't get better.
And that's the basic training.
Yes.
Why wouldn't you say it get better? It has to get better.
It doesn't get better. I was just as afraid of my drill sergeant on the graduation field as I was the day that I met her.
Wow. She really left an impact on you.
I'll say.
So could you describe to me the next stages after the 6 weeks of basic training? What is the next stage?
The next stage is what's called AIT, and that's where you actually get your training for whatever you've selected that you want to be when you grow up. They're going to send you somewhere and somebody's going to train you. So you're going to sit in classroom, you're still going to dress, but you're not going to be in barracks as you were as a trainee. So you're now a little step up.
Okay.
And you have a little more privileges, because when you're not in school, then you get to do what you want to do. So it's a little more open and relaxed, but you do need to pass. It's just like a college course. And, you still have to make sure that your area is squared away, and you still have responsibilities.
Okay. So when you say
And that may last for 6 weeks, 2 months, 6 months, depending upon what type of training or what your selection was.
Okay. And at the moment of your training, where were you located again?
Training was in Fort Gordon, Georgia.
Okay, so you were in Georgia.
Right.
How was the weather? Did it get harsh while you were there?
There were times, and not a lot of snow, but it does get cold. Carolina was, I was there in September. It didn't really I was out before it started to snow.
Okay.
Because that was warm. California was cold and rainy all the time. Earthquakes.
Do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual events while you were in your training?
There were so many events. The fun times were usually sitting around in the barracks listening to war stories. And finding out what somebody else did when they were in Vietnam, and how they ran, and how they, got away, and some of the crazy things. Just so many stories, and those were just a lot of bonding, and you just get close to these people because they're like family. And I just remember what that closeness felt like and how safe it was.
Did you or were you involved in any prank that was pulled?
No, I didn't have nerve to do any of that.
Okay.
As I told you, I was a very disciplined child, and I didn't take a lot of chances.
How did you guys entertain yourself in this basic training? No, not basic training, just your training now. Because I know you had more free time than you would in your barracks. So what did you do? Just go out?
Yeah, just go out into the city, listen to music. We sat together, and we would plan what we were going to do. Mostly listening to music, figuring out what we wanted to do for the rest of the afternoon. Go out shopping, just kind of life stuff. But when you're near a city that's basically funded by military, because everybody there is connected to the service in some way, whether they're civilian or active duty, they treat you a little different when you go into town, because they expect for you to spend money. And you make the town happen. They wait for the weekend for the GIs to come down.
Okay. Yeah, you guys are coming down.
You're going to spend money, you're going to shop, the guys are going to drink, they're going to stay out, and that was just the life.
Partying.
That was the life.
Did your military experience influence your thinking about the war or about the military in general?
Didn't so much influence about the war, because the war was over, but it definitely influenced the way that I thought about life in general, because I basically grew up in the military, and it changed my thought patterns. I had a deeper respect. I understood life a little differently, even though I was young, because I was 22 when I got out. And it changed my perspective.
Okay. Are you in any veterans organization or any type of?
I try to do some volunteer. I've signed up to do some things, and even participating in this interview is interesting. And I try to help anybody that's service connected. I see in my private practice veterans, and I always want to try to go that extra mile because I can understand what they've gone through. So I have a greater respect for them.
Okay. Do you attend any reunions?
There haven't been, no.
Okay. How did the service affect your life today? If you look back on it now, do you think you would have taken the path that you are on now?
Probably not. Probably not. Without the military, I probably wouldn't have been able to endure 20 plus years at the post office. And without the military, I wouldn't have paid attention to detail as I do now. Look, listen, and learn. Yeah. And without the military, I certainly wouldn't have the respect that I have and the ability to think linear and figure out the next plan of action and actually make it work.
Okay. If we were to go into war right now at this moment, would you think that you would be able to use your skills that you had in your training again, all over again?
I doubt it. I have a new skill set now, but if there were an opportunity, I would definitely participate today without even thinking twice.
Is there anything that you'd like to add to this interview that we didn't cover?
No, but I would like to just make a comment that I think it takes me back, and I have a visual of all of these people, and I have the visual of this young person doing calisthenics because all of these memories are still there, and I remember them fondly. And thank you so much for allowing me to go down memory lane.
Thank you for joining us.
Yes.
I got a question. What were you doing prior to going into the service?
Florida State University.
Just going to college?
Yeah, freshman.
What city is FSU in?
Tallahassee.
Right, okay. How many different places were you stationed while you were on active duty?
Fort Gordon.
Where's that
Initially.
What's Fort Gordon at?
Georgia.
Okay.
Outside of Augusta, I believe.
Okay.
The active duty station was Fort Ord, and that's outside of Monterey, near Salinas, California.
And how many years were you in the service altogether?
3 and some months.
Did you ever get to travel overseas at all?
No.
Okay. So you basically just stayed at your duty base, and how did you visit home? Come back to Florida?
Maybe once, but rarely.
Okay. That's it.
Oh. Okay. Well, thank you.
I was saying we covered that in the beginning.
Just wanted to get the place. I don't think she said Monterey, but at any rate.
Oh no, yeah, she just said outside of Selena though.
Yeah, Salinas.
Salinas.
What was the name of the base in California?
Near Salinas.
Gordon, in California.
It was Fort Gordon.
Okay.
That was it.
All right. And 5.